Indeed, I repeat again.
Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet Malhotra. Well, the Union Cabinet has approved two crucial bills aimed at implementing simultaneous elections for the Lok Sabha and state assemblies. And that's a move that could transform India's electoral system. Although the revised list of business in the lower house does not include the One Nation, One Election draft Bill 2024, it can be introduced in the Lok Sabha as it is up to the discretion of the government. If passed without modifications, the initiative could be enacted starting 2034. Well, the two bills that have been approved by Prime Minister Modi and his Union Cabinet include the Constitution Amendment Bill 2024 and the Union Territory Laws 2024. And the big question that arises is India ready for the enactment of this bill? And how do we, in fact, build consensus when it comes to this? We'll talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Mr. K.V. Dhananjay, Senior Advocate. Kailash Vasudev, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, also joins us on the program. Mr. A.K. Singh, Supreme Court Advocate, also with us on the program. Last but not the least, Advocate Khushbu Jain also joins us on the show. K.V. Dhananjay, I'll begin with you. Well, this is a big move. You know, ever since independence, India has been having this sporadic formula of having elections, differently from the state and the center. But now there is an attempt to consolidate it. And why not? It is going to bring about a plethora of savings. It's going to bring about lesser headache when it comes to the organization as well as the implementation and the execution of elections as well. But it's a large exercise. It is not something that can be implemented from 2029. This has to be taken up in 2034. There is objection from the opposition as well. In your opinion, in terms of the legalities, are there any roadblocks? Are there any impediments which could stall this apparently good way of conducting elections, which of course is going to save the exchequer also millions and millions, perhaps even billions of dollars?
Well, a proposal. So I think it's almost impossible to have a very strong opinion for or against a proposal. So it makes sense to look at the pros and cons. So before we come to the proposal, we perhaps could look at the pros of the current system. What happens in the current system is, should there be a scandal or a corruption or something of that kind at the center? So then the political party at the center would be mindful of an election an election going to be held in a state 3 months down the line or 6 months down the line. And it is going to have some kind of an impact on, it is going to make some difference. The fact that there is going to be an election, political parties then will be careful about, okay, what happens to their image and what kind of scandals erupt during their tenure. I'm saying this because this is a new proposal, and one of the leading lawyers in this country who was part of this committee very recently was on television to talk about the virtues of this new proposal, and I was surprised, or rather I was rather baffled to hear what the eminent lawyer was saying. The eminent lawyer was talking about the recent Maharashtra State Assembly election, and he said that people from the center went there in such large numbers. There was basically policy paralysis and all that. So this problem, this has more to do with this is not really a problem for which you will amend the constitution. This is a problem probably with the political party concerned, which raises expectations around the country even for local issues, which does not cultivate enough local leaders, and which therefore has to fight fire every time there's a state election. So it simply runs over there. Now, this was being offered as a primary justification for making sure that we will have simultaneous elections. Now, there are free time management gurus on the internet. So if a political party simply does not know, where to focus its energies and where not to, and if its top leaders in Delhi are going to compulsively attend state assembly, to canvass in state assembly elections, then I think the problem is not really with the constitution or the scheme of elections that we currently have, and the solution is certainly not going to be, calling for simultaneous elections at all. Because you look at the proposal itself, what would happen if the center develops a kind of instability we saw in the 1990s? So many different governments, so many different prime ministers came in so short a time. The proposal does not really answer any of that, and it's not like India is going to have stability all the time for all time to come in this future in the center. So that's not accounted for enough. Number one. Number two, recently in Karnataka there was a by-election, and there will be by-elections even under the new system. And this by-election, which in fact happened because of the resignation of Mr. Kumar Swamy, who in fact is part of the center, that by-election was conducted with more fanfare than even the general election to the state assembly conducted last year. So that is not going to be avoided by this new system. So I think the new system at some level is probably not really a solution to lack of management, time management, or discipline management by the political parties right now, the leading political parties. But the pros of the new system probably would be that in a system where you have simultaneous elections, you will have fewer state or regional political parties make their mark. And there is a great deal of scholarly research to show that India is being hurt by a large number of fringe regional outfits, which really can't think, about the national picture, but would in fact always think, very, very narrow terms in terms of their own region within a state. So there's a lot of scholarly research on that aspect. So on that front, probably you could say that if, though nobody is talking about keeping out smaller political parties through this mechanism, it's widely believed that the simultaneous election system is going to bring down the emergence or bring down the size of a large number of regional political parties. And so again, one of the scholarly, I've looked at so much of scholarly research, and one consistent theme that emerges in that scholarly research is that over the last 15 years, you have had this intense competition, desperation to, increase reservation for people that are already in the dominant groups. And that's largely spearheaded by smaller political parties, regional political parties, and that is how they start canvassing and then secure their votes. So maybe there is, a benefit of having a simultaneous election to bring down the impact of smaller regional political parties, which probably don't have the, larger picture in mind, and which inadvertently, hurt the, national prospects. So.
Okay. Let me also rope in Mr. A.K. Singh into this conversation. Mr. Singh, thank you for being here. I hope you can hear me, sir.
Yes.
Well, there's pandemonium. There's, of course, an argument in the parliament when it comes to one nation, one poll. But if you look at the legalities and how, the entire system for the last 75 odd years has been intertwined in a method for madness kind of a module when it comes to our state and central elections, it is very smug at this point in time. Everybody is okay about it. But the fact of the matter is that a number of resources are going to be saved, a number of rupees are also going to be saved, and it's going to be lesser headache for the agencies also when it comes to guarding poll booths, taking care of EVMs at once instead of doing it at a calendar which perhaps takes place 25 to 30 times in 5 years. How are you poised when it comes to this particular reform in our polling outlook?
As far as my personal view is concerned, it's a very welcoming reform. And I think this should have been implemented years back. This is my personal, because there are so many reasons. I could see the data of the election expenditure made in the election in 2019 was the 60,000 crore. It's a government data, right? So, and in the election held in 1951, the expenditure was incurred of around 11 crore. So, 11 crore to 60,000 crore, this is the journey of the general elections expenditure. So, I think definitely this will reduce the cost of the political expenditure and during the elections that fuel somehow the inflation in the country. And the second thing, there are the 5 points that I have noted down. One is the good governance. Second is this will reduce the cost and the resources. Third is this will reduce the political corruptions. Fourth is the simplified the voting process. And fifth is the stable finances. There are the 5 points. On the there are the 5 points on which this this will benefit somehow, and it's a welcoming step of the government.
Khushbu? Khushbu, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm there with you.
All right. Well, we're not going to get into the political differences that are taking place in the parliament as at this point in time. But a number of countries, including Germany, including the United States, Canada, and a number of developed countries have figured out a formula whereby state and central elections take place at the same time. And for the world's largest democracy, I think it is a must exercise for a number of reasons.
I am absolutely in agreement with you, and I think the speaker before me spoke also on the same line that 60, 70 years back and today there's a different story that stands. We are in a different standing when it comes to things, and we have seen that how the scenario, the kind of elections that we are facing right now has an impact when it comes to cause, has an impact when it comes to, we see how many policies keep coming in, to favor people for the vote bank and for things like that. So when it comes to long-term making of policy which can benefit people and nation building at the same time, when it comes to governance that can go continuously, when it comes to administration, when it comes to utilization of our security forces and other things, for all these things we have seen that how this continuous election that keeps on going on disrupts that entire thingy. And for this purpose, we need to have one election, one nation, one election policy, which will in a way have an impact when it comes to cost. Maybe right now you're looking into the cost that will come in because we are making a huge change in a country like this. But in overall, if you'll see, it will have a cost reduction because the kind of financial burden associated with conducting multiple elections over a short period of time and the kind of resources that are being spent when it comes to logistics, election logistics, security, administrative cost and others are huge. The second that comes is administrative efficiency, which I was talking about. Now, administrative efficiency is also something very important. We see that the focus of government is more on the elections or streamlining the electoral process rather than focusing on governance, if I have to put it across. And that's where I think they are engaged more in the election duties and less in the administrative efficiency, which leads to continuity in the governance aspect. That's number two. The number three that comes is, all of us will agree with that, is the disruption that the election brings in when it comes to normal governance and development of activities due to imposition of model code of conduct. Now this will also have an impact, and this will have smoother implementations of policies and programs without any interruptions, and these programs and these policies will be meant for a longer time rather than a short term making benefits out of elections and to please people or the vote banks for that matter. That's number three. Number four that comes is you will have increased voter turnout, because if it's a one nation, one vote, I know that this is the date and the whole nation can't come in. We have people, I'm living in Bombay, my voter is in Indore. So, that aspect of when is which, where vote is happening, what kind of vote is happening, those things also come up. So I think there would be increased when it comes to turnout of people who are voting, which will help again to understanding that where exactly are, people's vote lies or interest lies in which party. And the fifth that comes is enhanced focus on your national issues. That's something which is very important, that instead of thinking of, again I'm repeating that point, that focusing your shift when it comes to campaigns, when it comes to getting more votes, your focus should shift as a government towards national issues, towards larger, broader governance issues rather than local politics or campaigns which can which are meant for more votings. And again, historical precedent, it was kind of practiced in the year 1967, and obviously they again get back to that. So I think we do have a precedent there, and we have a precedent worldwide that there are large countries who are adopting to something like that, and we can take example of that. And I think the report also talks about the same, give the references of the same, and we can adopt. And I think it's a welcome move. Our country need to have it. It is not for benefit of anybody else, but for people and at last for the nation when it comes to nation building and better governance and administration.
Mr. Kailash Vasudev, do you agree with Advocate Khushbu Jain that administratively this is going to be a boon for India, considering the scale of voting in our country? It is something which should have been thought over a long time ago.
Good evening. See that I put this in three aspects. A, the functioning of a democracy, which is the fundamental of our constitutional position. Second, the right of people to elect their own representatives. Third, and not the least, is running the country for good governance. So there are three different divisions. On the question of democracy, democracy doesn't have a price. If you're going to calculate the rights of a voter based on the premise of expense incurred per election, I think we're making a gross mistake. I'll tell you why. Today you have an election in which you choose a state government or a provincial government, and you have chosen the central government simultaneously. For some political considerations, please understand, from 1952 to 1966, there was only one major political party, the Congress. After 66, you began to have a lot of small parties which came in and they started constituting coalition governments at the center. As Mr. Dhananjay just mentioned, between 1990s, we had 5 prime ministers. In the period of the 5 prime ministers, they were all coalitions. You had Gowda, you had Gujral, you had Chandrasekhar, you had the Narasimha Rao government, and then eventually you had the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government, which collapsed after 13 days. So therefore, look at it in that perspective. What happens if the central government collapses, but the states don't? The state carries on with its own body. You will have a clash of interests, which will become absolutely impossible to manage for the purposes of running that state or running the center. You will have a collision. I don't use the word C-O-L-L-I-S-I-O-N, collision will be of that kind. If you have divisions of that kind, then democracy gets imperiled because the central government will try and impose itself like it happened in 77. In 1977, Charan Singh, the then Deputy Prime Minister and Home Minister, wrote a letter to all the state governments, 8 governments, that you please dissolve your houses to keep it in conformity with what has happened in the center. Those governments went to court, the state of Rajasthan judgment of 77, where they said they challenged this particular circular. Supreme Court said, no, we are not getting into this. These are political thickets. In any case, nothing stops the government from making a suggestion. The second aspect of this is the division in power in our system is federal. A state has a right, the center has its rights. You have different articles which govern this. You have 82, you have 81, you have the different articles, 72, and 172, which comes in for state assemblies. You are amending all these to bring it in conformity with this. Testing ground 2034. So you're going to have an election in 2029, followed by election in 2034, to bring all this in conformity with one. Now, how do you bring the tribal people within this area? How do you do it? There are suggestions in the proposed bill, but those are to be tested. You cannot take away the constitutional right of people for the purposes of uniformity in elections on the ground that it's going to cost money. There I have a very serious disagreement because money is no consideration, as I said, for democracy. The third aspect which becomes relevant here is, in the federal structure, every state has a policy. A state government collapses. A majority government walks up. Take, for example, the Rajiv Gandhi government came with 400 plus votes. It collapsed. It happens in the states. You've had the Jayalalitha governments collapsing. You've had various governments in various states collapsing with absolute. The Northeast, for example, it's a constant stirring of elections and the election process all the way down. Nagaland, Manipur, they've had changes because of local considerations. So therefore, the issue is not constitutional amendment. The question is not how you change the constitution. It is not the question of your expenditure. The most important thing here is to have political probity. Every political party has to accept the fact that nation first, my pocket later. Our politicians work on a principle: the sooner the election, the more money to make, because more people will come in. If you're going to work on the principle of making money out of politics, you will never have a successful system, however wide your amendments may be. Constitutional amendments are made by people. They are to be followed. How far can you follow it? How far can you give it? See what's happening in every state coalition which is taking place. Maharashtra, to name one of it. You are seeing what happened in Karnataka. You are seeing what happened in Andhra Pradesh. You see what happened in Telangana. You see how the elections took place in Madhya Pradesh. You see, the outflow of money is what governs elections. It is no longer the rights of the people. And it is an average man wanting to say, Bhai, wo neta ne bade paise bana diye. How do you answer that? Where is your answer to that? Is where probity has to come in. We have got to have a system of electing people who will work for the nation in the interest of the nation and for the nation. If you don't have that, whatever amendments you make, whatever changes you make, whatever decisions you take, you cannot possibly standardize the election process by having a unison in this system. State and center are different. Bring them together, it will be a very remarkable job because, as I said, up to 1966, you had one political party. Today, you've got vociferous parties, you've got 30 parties or national parties.
Right.
How do you regulate them?
That's a good point, sir. That's a good point. Mr. Dhananjay, we also have to keep an eye and be very, very wary about the, output which is going to be derived from combining the state and the central elections. And when I say output, I meant the efficacy of this entire process. Is that going to suffer in any way? Mr. Dhananjay?
I don't think the savings are not going to be substantial relative to the size of the Indian economy, or for that matter, the finances of the central government, or even the spending by the state governments. The savings, the fact that the committee doesn't really quantify the savings, in great detail, will tell you that it's more like just an assumption that there will be a substantial saving. But whatever substantial saving it is, relative to the central government's finances, I think it's a very small sum to start with, number one. Number two, the proposal does not talk about mandatory voting. Now, one of the great complaints that we've had in this country is in urban centers, we see relatively less voting. And I don't think this proposal is doing anything about that. And the more important aspect you will find is that 80% of the 80% of those who wrote to this committee were in favor of this move. And even amongst political parties, I think 30 odd political parties were for it. Now, there were these 15 other political parties, mostly the opposition political parties, that were opposing this. Now, I think they might, there could be some reason or justification for them to oppose, because you look at what happened in the last 10 years. Of course, I'm only limiting it to the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, is the BJP at the center has been responsible for failing so many state governments. And what happens and why that is made even possible is because of our weak 10th schedule. Now, under the 10th schedule, if a person incurs disqualification, the 10th schedule says that he will be disqualified from being a member of the House. Now, what this term means is a matter for interpretation, and the Election Commission's interpretation matters the most. The Election Commission says that if an MLA or an MLA is disqualified, and should there be a by-election to fill up the vacant seat, then he may very well contest that seat. Now, unfortunately, no court in this country has come down against that interpretation. So perhaps the people here, the fact is that the committee here says that this is a pressing need. I mean, it's possible it's a pressing need, but there were some things that were far more pressing than that. One of which is to make smaller amendments to the 10th schedule, so that if a person is disqualified, he is disqualified for X number of years from filling up any seat in any election to the state legislative assembly or to the center. Now, that has not happened, number one. Number two, because this is an experiment, we really don't want to get stuck. So perhaps the modification to these provisions should be such that they would lapse at the end of 10 years. And in order to extend it, you will have to similarly, come out with an amendment.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've run out of time, Mr. Dhananjay. We'll have to wrap up right now, but appreciate all the inputs and perspectives and the intellectual angles we were able to, in fact, accommodate on this show. We take a short break. Be right back.
अरे ऋषि